It was supposed to be empowering. 2 women, 2 microphones, 1 global audience, and a promise of honest conversation. But honesty, as it turned out, was the last thing Meghan Markle wanted that morning. What unfolded inside the Call Her Daddy studio wasn't just an interview, it was a duel dressed up as dialogue. A collision between 2 women who both knew how to control a room. The studio had been softened for the occasion. The usual neon glow was dimmed to a warm amber. The bold decor rearranged to resemble something regal yet modern, a setting fit for royalty, or at least the version of royalty that streamed well on Spotify. Behind the glass, producers moved quickly, whispering directions, tweaking lights, adjusting levels. Everyone knew this was a big one. Alex Cooper sat poised, confident, her signature smirk in place as she adjusted her mic and crossed one leg over the other. Today, she began looking into the camera. We've got someone who knows what it's like to have the whole world talk about her. But today she gets to talk back. The live chat exploded instantly, hearts, fire emojis, crown symbols. Then the studio door opened, and Meghan Markle appeared. She looked immaculate, every hair perfectly arranged, wearing a white silk blouse under a black blazer that gleamed subtly beneath the lights. She smiled that measured, diplomatic smile that had once charmed the world, and took her seat opposite Alex. "Alex," she said smoothly, her tone practiced but warm. "Thank you for having me. I've been wanting to have this kind of real conversation." Alex's grin sharpened. "Well, Meghan, that's kind of what we do here, real conversations. No filters, no fluff. You sure you're ready for that?" Meghan's smile tightened, barely perceptible to anyone not watching closely. "I've handled the British tabloids, Alex," she said lightly. "I think I'll survive Call Her Daddy." Laughter rippled across the studio. Even the crew chuckled. Alex raised her brows in amusement and said, "Okay then, let's get into it." The opening minutes flowed easily. Motherhood, charity work, mindfulness, California sunshine. Meghan spoke like someone delivering a monologue she had rehearsed 100 times. Every phrase polished, every anecdote framed to sound natural yet safe. Her words carried grace, but no grit. They were eloquent, elegant, and empty. But Alex Cooper wasn't built for softballs. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, the kind of shift that signaled a pivot from pleasantries to pressure. "So," she said, "you talk a lot about finding your voice. But do you think you've ever used your story, or your voice, to control the narrative about you?" The question landed like a dropped glass. Meghan blinked, her smile unbroken, but her posture subtly changing, back straightening, shoulders squaring. "I think women are always accused of being manipulative when they simply speak their truth," she replied carefully. "Maybe that says more about the listener than the speaker." Alex nodded, pretending to agree. "Totally fair. But some people think you've monetized your truth, made your pain part of your brand." Silence followed. A bracelet on Meghan's wrist clinked as she adjusted her hand. "I find that an unfair assessment," she said crisply. "When a woman uses her experiences to empower others, it's called a brand. When a man does it, it's called leadership." Alex let out a soft laugh, deliberate, pointed. "That's a good line," she said. "You've rehearsed that one before." The smirk lingered. Meghan's eyes flickered. "Excuse me?" "I mean, you're smooth with these answers," Alex said, smiling as she leaned back. "Feels like you've done this dance before." Something in the air shifted. It wasn't confrontation yet, not overtly, but tension shimmered just under the laughter. Meghan adjusted slightly in her chair. "I think I've had enough interviews to know what works and what doesn't," she replied evenly. Alex tilted her head. "Right, but this isn't Oprah, Meghan. We actually push back here." The chat went wild. Half the viewers were cheering, the other half cringing. Meghan's tone cooled. "I'm not afraid of pushback, Alex," she said, "but maybe ask questions worth answering." For a moment, the room froze. Then, Alex smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, I will." They both laughed, but it wasn't laughter. It was a warning disguised as wit. Behind the glass, a producer mouthed to the sound engineer. "This is going to blow up," and they were right. The energy had shifted completely. The easy rhythm of early conversation was gone, replaced by a quiet hum of anticipation, like static before a storm. Meghan's charm was still present, but it had hardened into armor. Alex, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in the new air, her eyes sharp, her posture leaning in. She could sense the edge where politeness ended and truth began. "Okay," Alex said finally, her voice calm, but cutting. "You've talked about finding freedom, about reclaiming your narrative. But do you ever think you've gone too far? That maybe the way you've told your story has made people lose sympathy instead of gain it?" Meghan tilted her head slightly, her lips curving in a smile that was almost defiant. "I think people are uncomfortable when a woman stops apologizing for herself," she said. "Maybe that's the real problem." Alex chuckled softly. "Maybe, but it's not just that, right? Even some of your supporters say it feels like you traded privacy for attention. That did it." The warmth drained from Meghan's face. "That's such a lazy argument," she replied, her tone suddenly firm, almost cutting. "Sharing your truth isn't the same as performing it. It's fascinating how quickly people confuse vulnerability with vanity." Alex didn't look away. "Sure," she said, "but you are performing here. We both are. It's a show, right? So let's be real. You chose the spotlight again. You could have stayed private, disappeared, lived quietly, but you didn't. Why?" The question hung in the air like a dare. Even the faint hum of the studio equipment seemed to stop. Meghan's lips pressed together. Her eyes lowered briefly, then lifted again, steeled. "Because silence never protected anyone," she said softly. "Especially not women like me." Alex's smirk returned, faint, skeptical, but curious. "And what kind of woman is that?" Meghan held her gaze for a moment too long, as if weighing whether to answer or to let the silence speak for her. Then, in that steady media-trained cadence, she replied, "A woman who's expected to be grateful for surviving what she should never have endured in the first place." The chat exploded again, divided, passionate, relentless. Behind the cameras, Alex's producers were already signaling each other. They knew. The clip would go viral before the hour was over. What had begun as an empowering conversation between two women had become something else entirely, not a dialogue, but a duel. The kind where every word was a strike, every smile a shield, and every pause a test of who would blink first. When the episode ended, both women thanked each other, smiling for the cameras as if nothing had happened. But the silence that followed, once the microphones went cold, told the real story. No one in the room spoke for several seconds. Then Alex exhaled and muttered, "That'll trend by morning." It did. By sunrise, clips from the interview were everywhere, analyzed, praised, condemned, dissected. Viewers debated who had won, who had crossed the line, who had told the truth. But what no one could deny was that something rare had happened on air that day, not just an interview, but a reckoning. Because when two women who both understand power sit across from each other, honesty isn't always the goal. Sometimes it's survival. It started with a question, sharp, simple, and impossible to dodge. And what kind of woman is that exactly? For a moment, Meghan blinked. Her expression caught somewhere between surprise and disbelief. "Excuse me?" Alex Cooper didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You said, women like me. I'm just curious, what kind of woman do you mean? Famous, ambitious, married well?" The studio went utterly still. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed to fade. Meghan's practiced poise began to show the slightest crack. She adjusted her posture, her lips curving into a restrained smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You're twisting my words," she said evenly. "I'm literally quoting you," Alex replied, her tone light but deliberate, the kind of teasing lilt that always carried a blade beneath it. "Come on, Meghan. You a pro. You know how this works." Meghan let out a small, tight laugh. "Right, I forget how much expertise you have in royal politics." "Oh, I don't," Alex said, smile unwavering. "But I do know how fame works. You either own it, or it owns you." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And from where I'm sitting, it kind of looks like it owns you." That one landed. Meghan blinked twice, her jaw setting just slightly. When she spoke again, her tone had hardened, the warmth gone. You know, Alex, it's easy to throw opinions around from behind a microphone. It's a lot harder to live under global scrutiny every single day. Alex leaned back in her chair, eyes steady. True, she said casually. But that's kind of the life you chose, isn't it? You didn't exactly walk away from the spotlight, you just rebranded it. Meghan's gaze sharpened. Is that what you think this is? A rebrand? Alex shrugged, feigning indifference. You tell me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric, thick with restraint. Meghan crossed one leg over the other, the diamond bracelet on her wrist catching the studio light like a warning flare. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, colder. I came here because I thought this was a show about women supporting women, she said, not tearing them down. Alex tilted her head, smiling again, not mockingly, but like a cat playing with a cornered mouse. Oh, it is. But supporting women doesn't mean agreeing with them. Sometimes it means asking why they say one thing and do another. Meghan inhaled slowly, her nostrils flaring. You're mistaking courage for contradiction. No, Alex replied, voice calm but glacial now. I'm recognizing a pattern. The two women locked eyes, their microphones only inches apart, both smiling for the cameras, but the smiles had turned to armor. Meghan's next words came out soft, deliberate and dangerous. You know, Alex, she said, I don't think you'd last a day in my shoes. Alex leaned in, unflinching. Oh, I wouldn't want to, but I also wouldn't pretend they were comfortable. A startled laugh slipped from one of the sound engineers, before being silenced instantly by a glare from the producer. Meghan exhaled sharply. Visibly collecting herself, You really enjoy this, don't you? She said. Provoking people. Alex didn't hesitate. I enjoy honesty. It's rare in rooms like this. Meghan's gaze turned icy. Honesty without empathy, she said, is just cruelty. Alex smiled faintly, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the room. And control, disguised as vulnerability, is manipulation. The words struck like thunder. The studio air thickened. Even Meghan seemed momentarily unsure of how to respond. She blinked once, twice, then adjusted her blazer with a steady hand and forced another camera-ready smile. You really think you figured me out, don't you? Alex shook her head slowly. No, she said, but you're making it very easy for people to think they have. The tension was now unbearable. The camera crew exchanged nervous glances. Someone whispered, "Should we cut?" But neither woman moved. Alex stayed locked in, and Meghan refused to retreat. Finally, Alex broke the silence, her voice softening, but never losing its edge. Let's take a quick break, she said. When we come back, maybe we can talk about what all this really means when empowerment turns into performance. Meghan's smile froze, her jaw tight. Sure, she replied coolly. If that's what you need for your ratings? Alex grinned. Oh, trust me, Meghan. We already got them. The red recording light went dark. The silence that followed was deafening. Neither woman looked away. Producers pretended to shuffle papers, but everyone knew the real story was unfolding silently between those two sets of eyes. The next segment, they all understood, would decide everything: reputation, perception, legacy. When the cameras blinked back to life, the tone was different. The laughter was gone. The Call Her Daddy studio had never felt quieter. Even the hum of the lights seemed sharper now, like a reminder that every breath was being recorded. Alex Cooper sat a little taller, her expression unreadable. She'd interviewed rappers, athletes, actors, people whose egos filled entire rooms. But this was different. Meghan Markle wasn't just a guest. She was a test. So, Meghan, Alex began smoothly, her tone deceptively calm. Before the break, we talked about perception. You've said the media distorted your story, that people saw what they wanted to see. But isn't that inevitable when you tell the world your life story through interviews, documentaries, books? She paused, eyes gleaming. Don't you think that maybe? Meghan cut in, voice low and firm. You mean when a woman dares to speak for herself? You call that oversharing? Alex didn't blink. No, she said evenly. I'm asking whether constantly correcting the narrative becomes part of the performance. The word hung in the air. Performance. Meghan leaned forward slightly. The studio lights catching her profile, turning her into a sculpture of control. I don't perform, she said quietly. I clarify. I tell my truth because nobody else will. Alex's eyes narrowed. But doesn't truth lose its power when it has to be repeated so many times? Meghan's lips parted in disbelief. So I should just stay silent? Is that it? I'm saying, Alex replied, that maybe silence would speak louder if it wasn't always followed by another interview. A faint gasp came from behind the glass. The tension had reached its breaking point. Meghan sat back, arms crossed, every inch of her posture radiating composure and fury. You sound like every headline I've ever read, she said. It's interesting how people claim they want authenticity until it doesn't look the way they expect. Alex nodded slightly, her tone cooling to something almost reflective. Maybe. Or maybe people just get tired of hearing the same pain turned into a brand. The words landed heavy. Meghan didn't answer. She simply stared back, her expression unreadable, her eyes unblinking. When the episode finally wrapped, both women smiled again for the cameras, thanked each other politely, and shook hands. But everyone in the studio knew this wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a clash of philosophies, a battle over truth, image, and control. As the mics went dead and the lights dimmed, Meghan stood first, offering one last poised smile before walking off set. Alex stayed seated, staring at the empty chair across from her, the ghost of a smirk flickering at her lips. By the next morning, clips of the exchange were everywhere, dissected, replayed, mimified, debated. Some called Alex fearless, others cruel. Some called Meghan brave, others manipulative. But one thing was certain, neither woman had lost, because in the new economy of fame, truth doesn't matter as much as who tells it better. And that morning both of them had told it perfectly. The room had grown colder not by temperature, but by the sharp, invisible current that filled the air. Alex leaned forward, voice low and steady. I don't perform, Alex, Meghan said, her tone clipped, each word carefully measured. I live my truth. Maybe that's hard to understand for someone who profits from other people's stories. Alex's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Touché, but come on, you profit from yours too, don't you? The air tightened. The crew felt it. The easy rhythm of conversation had vanished, placed by something brittle and electric. Meghan tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Oh, do you ask your male guests if they profit from their stories or just women you don't like? Alex gave a short, almost amused laugh. I like you fine. You're just kind of allergic to accountability. That one landed. Meghan's expression froze, then hardened. Accountability for what exactly? For surviving relentless bullying? For leaving a system built on control and hypocrisy? Alex's gaze stayed locked on hers. No, for pretending you left it behind while still talking about it every chance you get. The studio went still. Even the sound engineer stopped moving. For a moment, it was as if the entire room was holding its breath. Meghan's reply came soft, but dangerous. You're crossing a line, maybe Alex said, shrugging. But you came here to be real, right? That's what this show is, real, unfiltered. Being real doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Being respected doesn't mean avoiding hard questions. As the words collided midair. Snapping the tension like a wire pulled too tight, Meghan exhaled sharply, shaking her head. You know, ow, she said, voice rising just a notch. This was supposed to be a conversation between women, not another ambush disguised as empowerment. Alex sat back, crossing her legs with calculated calm. Empowerment doesn't mean agreement. Sometimes it means holding up a mirror so people can see what they hide from themselves. Meghan gave a short, bitter laugh. You think you're holding up a mirror? No, you're holding up a spotlight. You don't want to understand. You want to expose. Maybe, Alex said softly, because the more you talk, the harder you make yourself to understand. That line hit like a slap. Meghan's breath caught. Her expression flickered. You're unbelievable. You invite me here, pretend to care, then twist every word I say to make me the villain again? It's pathetic. No one's twisting anything, Alex said evenly. You're just not used to people pushing back. Meghan leaned forward, her voice slicing through the air. You should be careful, Alex. You're playing with narratives you don't understand. Alex smiled thinly. Maybe, but at least I'm not rewriting mine every 6 months. A sharp inhale came from someone behind the camera. Meghan blinked. Once, twice, visibly steadying herself. Wow, she said finally. So much for women supporting women. Alex's tone was quiet but final. Support doesn't mean silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the lights filled the room. Somewhere behind the glass, a pen tapped nervously against a producer's clipboard. Then Meghan straightened in her chair. With slow, deliberate grace, she brushed an invisible speck of lint from her sleeve. The gesture carried the weight of years of media training, a way of reclaiming power without saying a word. You know what? She said finally, flashing a polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe this wasn't the right platform after all. Some people mistake provocation for journalism. Alex tilted her head. And some mistake image management for honesty. That one pierced deeper than either expected. Meghan froze. Are you calling me fake? I'm saying there's a difference between authenticity and control, Alex replied calmly. And right now, you sound like someone trying to manage a headline. Meghan let out a soft, humorless laugh. You'll get your headline, Alex. Don't worry. She uncrossed her legs, then recrossed, then reclaiming her poise, settling back into the familiar armor of performance. Her tone cooled, steady as marble. Let's finish this, she said. The world deserves to see what happens when women tear each other down for sport. Alex turned to her producer. A whisper passed through the control room. Keep rolling. Everyone knew the storm wasn't over. The final act was still coming, and it was going to explode. The red recording light blinked back on. Instantly, both women straightened. The energy in the studio shifted again, dangerous, electric. Meghan sat perfectly still. Her arms folded across her chest, that polished half-smile fixed like armor. Alex leaned forward slightly, a portrait of calm before the chaos. The world outside had no idea what was about to unfold. All right, Alex began, her voice deceptively casual. Let's clear the air. Meghan, you've talked a lot about being misunderstood, so here's your chance. What do you think people get wrong about you? Meghan gave a small laugh, one that sounded practiced. Pretty much everything, she said. They see confidence and call it arrogance. They see boundaries and call it entitlement. Maybe that says more about them than it does about me. Alex nodded slowly. Fair point. But some would say that confidence crosses into defensiveness when every question becomes an attack. Meghan's expression darkened. That's a convenient way to frame it, isn't it? The interviewer gets to hide behind just asking questions, while the guest takes all the hits. Alex's voice remained calm. Only if the guest keeps swinging back. A few people behind the glass exchanged uneasy glances. One mouth to another, she's not going to let this go. Meghan leaned closer to the mic, her eyes locked on Alex. You think you're fearless because you ask provocative questions? Try living your life under a microscope. Try being reduced to a headline every time you speak. I don't envy that, Alex said. But the thing about a microscope is, it only shows what's already there. But lethal. Meghan blinked, her composure faltering for the briefest second before returning with precision. You know, Alex, she said coolly, I actually used to admire women like you. Until I realized how often you confuse cynicism with courage. Alex's smile didn't move, but her eyes did sharp, unwavering. And I used to admire women like you, she replied softly. Until I realized how easily empowerment turns into performance. The silence that followed was thunderous. Neither woman looked away in that moment. It wasn't about fame or interviews or ratings. It was about something rawer, collision between two versions of womanhood, two brands of strength that refused to yield. The cameras kept rolling. The audience at home would only see the edited version later, the polished exchange. the well-timed cut to commercial. But everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something far more dangerous than disagreement. They were watching two worlds collide: truth versus control, candor versus image, and neither would leave untouched. And as the red light glowed steady above them, the silence said everything words couldn't. The tension had been building since the first question. What started as an interview had turned into a duel of composure. The cameras were still rolling, but the air between them had shifted heavier, electric, alive. Every glance carried a challenge, every silence a dare. This wasn't dialogue anymore. It was sparring, pure and unfiltered. Meghan's tone, once carefully modulated for television charm, now sharpened like glass. "You've made a career out of provoking people, Alex," she said, her voice slicing through the studio haze. "But there's a fine line between authenticity and cheap entertainment." Alex's lips curved into a faint smile, not amusement but recognition. She'd been here before, on the edge of civility, where truth and discomfort met. "You'd know about performance, wouldn't you?" she replied calmly. The effect was instant, like a match dropped into dry forest. Meghan blinked, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Excuse me?" She said the words more reflex than response. Alex didn't back down. "You've spent years calling everything you do authentic," she said, her voice steady but pointed. "But every answer sounds like it was written by a PR team. If this is real, Meghan, why does it feel so rehearsed?" A hush fell over the studio. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Technicians exchanged uneasy glances behind the cameras. The audience, what little of it there was, leaned forward, breath caught in collective suspension. Meghan's jaw tightened. "You're being disrespectful." "Maybe," Alex said lightly, "but maybe someone needs to be. You've built an empire on the idea that you're silenced. And yet here you are, on another show, speaking louder than anyone else." Meghan let out a bitter laugh, the kind meant to mask fury. "So this is what women tearing each other down looks like? I expected more from you, Alex." Alex's eyes softened, just a fraction. "No, Meghan," she said quietly. "This is what holding each other accountable looks like. The problem is, you confuse accountability with attack." "Because it is an attack?" Meghan shot back, her composure cracking. "You don't know my life. You don't know what I've survived?" "You're right," Alex replied gently. "But you keep selling it as if you do." The silence that followed was unbearable. Meghan stared at Alex for a long, trembling moment, her face pale, her eyes shining with restrained emotion. The walls seemed to close in, the microphones, the cameras, the invisible millions who would soon watch every second of this unraveling. Finally, she stood. "I don't need to sit here and be disrespected." Alex's tone didn't waver. "Then don't. But the truth doesn't stop being true just because you walk away." Meghan froze mid-step, eyes narrowing. "You think this is truth? This is clickbait. You brought me here to make a spectacle." Alex leaned forward slightly, voice low but steady. "No, Meghan. You made it one the moment you turned a conversation into a performance." That was the line. The one that pierced through years of practiced calm. Meghan's breath caught. Her face hardened. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "You people are all the same. You want the headline, the soundbite, the meltdown?" Her hand went to her lapel mic. She ripped it off, the wire catching on her blazer. The sharp sound of the microphone hitting the chair echoed through the studio. "Show's over," she said, her voice icy. Then she turned and walked out, heels clicking with finality across the set. The camera stayed on Alex for several seconds. She didn't move, just sat there, still and composed amid the chaos. Then slowly she exhaled, straightened her notes, and looked directly into the lens. "I want to make something clear," she said softly, her tone measured but resolute. "I didn't bring Meghan here to embarrass her. I brought her here to talk openly, honestly, the way we do with every guest. But sometimes when people say they want honesty, what they really want is validation." She paused, letting the silence stretch, her gaze steady. "And that's the hardest part about real conversations. You can't script them." The red recording light blinked off. Silence settled again, this time deeper, heavier. Behind the glass, the producers sat frozen, unsure whether to speak. For a moment, the entire studio seemed suspended in disbelief. Finally, one of them whispered, almost reverently, "That's going to break the internet." And it did, within hours. The confrontation had spread like wildfire. Clips flooded social media. Headlines screamed across platforms. Hashtags like hashtag Meghan on call her daddy, hashtag Alex Cooper unfiltered, and hashtag interview gone wrong trended worldwide. News outlets replayed the footage, dissecting every glance, every pause, every tonal shift, like political analysts studying a debate. Public opinion fractured instantly. Some rallied behind Meghan, calling Alex cruel, opportunistic, another woman exploiting another's pain for views. Others praised Alex for saying aloud what so many whispered, that vulnerability without accountability isn't honesty. It's branding. Late-night hosts joked about it. Think pieces bloomed like weeds across the internet. But for those who had been in that studio, who had felt the silence after Meghan left, it wasn't about who won. It wasn't a fight between a journalist and a duchess, or a celebrity and a podcaster. It was something deeper, a clash between two women, each defending her own definition of truth. In that moment, they weren't symbols or headlines. They were mirrors facing each other, reflecting the same hunger for control, for dignity, for validation, and only one walked away still believing she had it. Back in the control room, Alex sat alone long after the crew had packed up. The studio lights dimmed, leaving the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muted glow of her laptop screen. She replayed the footage once, twice, watching not the argument, but the moments before it. The way Meghan's hand trembled slightly on the mug. The way her voice caught when she said, "You don't know my life." Alex closed her eyes. She hadn't set out to create a spectacle. She'd wanted a real conversation, but maybe real had become impossible when everything was content. Still, she knew she'd asked what others were afraid to, and maybe that was her flaw, or her courage. The next morning, headlines crowned it the interview that broke decorum. Publicists issued statements. Analysts debated ethics. But amid the noise, one comment on a quiet forum captured the truth best. It wasn't a takedown. It was a mirror, and the reflection was too honest to bear. Whether you saw it as cruelty or candor, the moment had become more than viral. It was cultural dissection, a study in the peril of performance, the cost of authenticity, and the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the most revealing conversations are the ones that end too soon. So what do you think? Did Alex push too far? Or was Meghan finally confronted with questions she couldn't control? Either way, that day proved one thing: the line between truth and theater isn't drawn on the stage. It's drawn in the silence that follows when the lights go off, and everyone decides for themselves what was real.